An effective safety speaker will use language that is both visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. In this safety speaker tip, I give you an example by telling an actual story I've used in presentations to illustrate visual, auditory, and kinesthetic language. So representational systems, visual, auditory, kinesthetic. Now we talked about one-on-one, but what about speaking to a group? I've got, 30 people in the room here? So how do I use representational systems when there's people that are visual, auditory, and kinesthetic in the room? Simple. I make sure, now I'm primarily visual, right? I don't have to work at all to use visual words in my language. It's part of what I do, okay? I don't have to think about it. So if I want to reach everybody in the audience, what do I have to do? I have to make it a point to use some auditory words and some kinesthetic words. If I focus on adding those words in, what's going to happen? I'm going to hit it. I don't have to say to myself, make sure I do something visual, because I can't help that. I'm going to just do that normally. So now let me tell you a story. There's another story in the book. I'll use this one I use in presentations. And I'm going to use visual, auditory, and kinesthetic language. I would ask that you don't leave the room till I'm done with the story. And there's a reason why, and I'll explain it when I'm done. But when I was younger, I used to go up, and my parents would take us, we'd go up on the coast of California. And you get up toward Eureka, California, just a little south of there. There's a little town called Scotia. And there's a lumber mill, or used to be. They've actually closed the mill down since then, a long time ago. But at the time, the Scotia lumber mill was there, and you could take a tour of this lumber mill. It was a redwood mill, and it was incredible. I would go to that, and it was so fabulous because, by the way, pay attention to when I'm using visual, auditory, kinesthetic language. You'd show up, and you'd check in with the guard station. They had a self-guided tour. So you would go ahead, check in with the guard, and they'd give you hearing protection. By the way, they didn't when I was young. When I was a kid, when I went there with my parents, they never gave you hearing protection. When I went there with my wife years later, they started using hearing protection. Safety has changed things over the years. But you go in there, you check with the guard, then the first place you go is you're over the mill where they cut all this wood. It's incredible. The vibration is amazing. They used the redwood and actually finished it with lacquer. I mean, it looks like, the stuff you'd see on a real fancy boat. And you put your hand on that, you can feel the vibrations from the saws. And then the logs, as they come in, as they cut, they come rolling in and thud, and you can feel the vibration through your feet. I mean, it's incredible. And you see it as the saws, the pitch of the saw, it's just whining. You can understand why now it makes sense to use hearing protection, because these suckers are loud. It's producing all this loud noise and everything else as the wood's going through, and you can see all the sawdust flying. It's an incredible show to see all this. You leave there and you go to this thing called the debarker. And it turns out that there's the pond where all the wood, the trees are put in this pond, and then they're taken up a conveyor belt into this thing called a debarker. And overnight, they debark a whole bunch of the trees to then take into the mill. And they debark enough overnight that so in the morning, when they start the mill off, by the end of the day, the mill is caught up to what they've done, and it comes out perfect. Okay? So one night, and you go into this debarker, it's amazing. You walk into this room, and outside of it, you see water spraying and everything else. The water sprays, you can see a rainbow. And you can hear how loud it is before you even go in there. And you go into this room that's got a certain degree of soundproofing, but it's still loud. You look, and they've got glass that you can look through and see what's happening. And what's happening is there's this V-shaped thing, and a tree comes rolling on in, and it's dropped into this V-shaped thing, and these arms grab it, and they hold on to this giant tree. Then this pressure sprayer comes down that's on a track, and it sprays right along the edge of the tree as the tree is maneuvered by these big hands that grab it and move it. And it sprays the bark right off of the tree. Now there's different debarkers. This one's pretty elegant because it takes it right down to the bare redwood. They don't waste hardly anything. And bark's flying everywhere. They got the glass. There's actually a lever. You can pull this lever, and water sprays against the glass window to clean it off because a lot of bark is being thrown up against it. And so you watch this great show. It's amazing. It's so loud, you can hardly talk to the person next to you. Well, one night, 3 guys are working in the debarker. And there they are working. As they do, the machine jams. Now, it turns out the procedure is that you're supposed to go ahead and turn the switch off in the control room. And then you're supposed to go and what? Lock out the main power supply. Then you go into it with chainsaws. They use chainsaws to break the jam free, and then they get the machine started up again and go back to work. No one else is at the mill but these 3 guys. The machine jams, and they go into the control room and they turn the switch off. This night, they decide not to go lock out the power supply. Why? Well, once again, it made sense, right? Why would they lock it out? There's nobody else in the mill. There's no reason, because in the control room, where they turn that switch, you have a complete view of the entire debarker. There's no place where you could be and the guy wouldn't see you. Secondly, if they didn't see you, you're running a chainsaw, they would hear you, right? There's no way anybody would accidentally walk in the control room, turn the switch off, so they figure, hey, why go lock it out? And they don't. They crawl into the machine, 3 of them, and they start cutting away, and for whatever reason, I don't know, and I don't think they ever found out, but the switch failed. And the power was on, and when they released that last jam, the thing started moving. 3 guys found themselves with these giant arms that are designed to hold a redwood tree, closing in on them and grabbing them. You know, you've heard of people getting clothing caught in machinery. Not these guys. The things that rolled the log I told you about, they were these very loud, and the reason it's so loud is it's this metal clanking around against the wood. It's a gear in a sense, and the log is sitting on top of it, and the gear starts spinning, and it spins the log. These guys are now getting their legs and their feet caught in the gears. I can't even imagine the screams that were happening. I can't imagine what it felt like having bones crushed in that device. These arms going to grab a tree are now hitting human beings. And then the sound of the pressure sprayer building up pressure as it starts coming down, and I can't even imagine the horror that each of them experienced. And the last guy, as he watched 2 other people torn apart by this incredibly high pressure water. And then he was gone. By the grace of God, hopefully they were unconscious at the time that happened. Nobody ever knows, because the machine kept going. And that morning, their friends, their neighbors, their co-workers got there, and the machine is still running, and there were ground up human beings where people used to be. And they turned the machine off and then went through the process of cleaning that out. That had to be an incredibly horrible evening, all because somebody didn't go and lock out a power supply. Maybe because the guy that built that little switch on the control panel didn't know 3 guys' lives would be depending upon it working properly, and it failed. Now, the reason I asked you to stay in the room is everybody take your arms, go like this. Okay, now go. Okay, good. Now, that story gets you in such a depressed state that physiology can get somebody's actual mood to change. Your emotions and your motions connect together. So if I get you to shake that out, the reason I don't want somebody leaving the room is I don't want to go into that deep, depressing story and then leave it. Although I've thought on occasion when I've had a competitor speaking after me that I could put the people in that state right before they're on. Yeah, it's like, yeah, enjoy this group. Anyway, but I've never done it. So what I did was, you heard the kinesthetic language. I talked about the grinding of the gears, the vibration holding the wood, the sounds and everything else. By the way, for those of you who are visual, you have a picture in your mind what that Scotia lumber mill looks like. For those of you that are auditory, you know what it sounds like. You made it up in your head. How many times have you listened to somebody in the radio and then you see their picture now, and you do it more now because of the internet, right? You see their picture and go, that was what I thought the guy looked like, right? He looks different than I thought. That doesn't even match up. What's with that, right? And so, because you were visual, what do? You have a visual image of that person speaking, what they would look like, instead of a guy that doesn't even match up. So that's how you use visual, auditory, kinesthetic. When I do that story, what I did was I took all of you in, whether you're kinesthetic, visual, or auditory, and I got you to connect with the story. Don't miss out. Be sure to hit the red button on the lower right and subscribe. That way, every time we release a video, you'll be aware of it.